Team, welcome back to part 3, the final part of our 3-part series with Rachel, Dr. Pojednic. The first 2 have received rave reviews, and I know folks have been waiting with bated breath here for part 3. So this week, here you have it.
Yeah, I think after part 2, we weren't entirely sure whether we were going to do a part 3, but looking over the notes document and reflecting on the conversations we had and the ones we weren't able to have in the first 2 parts, pretty easy choice to bring her back for a third one. And with the time warp effect, we're recording this intro as the first 2 parts have already released. And it's been interesting to see both from military folks and from non-military folks really interested in this. And it seems like something they'd been looking for that they had not found before.
And another quick shameless plug for some of our stuff. Rachel is on the Mops and Mo's Discord and is actually quite active on the Mops and Mo's Discord. So
answering supplement questions,
a lot of questions,
further research stuff.
Yeah. So if anything that she has talked about in the first conversation, second conversation, or now in the third conversation, if any of that strikes your fancy, head over to the website. You'll pretty easily be directed to our Discord. You can join up on the server and ask whatever questions you may have.
And I think there will be a Discord link in the show notes. I think I've been doing that on every episode.
You have. That is true. Look at us, man. We're good at this.
All over it.
Cool. All right. Well, enjoy.
So instead of like wasting content, I'm just going to make this recorded conversation and say that, and like audience is just joining us now, we're kind of talking about the Mops and Mo's of Mops and Mo's for a second before we hit
on
record.
Camera now, right?
We are.
So I shouldn't like pick my nose and stuff.
Exactly.
Okay.
But we were talking a little bit about which episodes are popular and which episodes aren't as popular. And I try to remind myself all the time that like number of downloads for an episode is just a measure of performance. It's not a measure of effectiveness. Whether an episode actually like influences behavior or makes something better is the measure of effectiveness. And that has very little to do with how many people listen and a lot to do with how much the people who do listen value it or take action. So some of those less downloaded episodes are actually more impactful among the people who did listen, though.
Kind of ties into what we're going to talk about today, actually, and maybe what you're going to study in the future. But before we dive into that, super cool new swag over there on your shoulder there.
Yeah. How old birthday? Girlfriend bought me a pretty cool.
He won't tell me where. I've asked him 3 times where he got it. He won't tell me.
I told you I didn't get it. You have to ask Emily.
Okay, sure.
It's really cool. It's like a good addition now that you're on.
I could
film.
put it over my oil painting.
Yeah. Sometimes after we finish recording an episode, so like, we record those little outro segments where we talk about our thoughts on the episode, and then that finishes, and then like 1 in 5-ish episodes, Emily's hanging out waiting for me to be done, and she brings the cat up to hang out with Drew for a little bit, and they get to chat.
Is fun. The new Rivers, is this all people see, or are they getting more than what I can see?
It formats differently depending on which format I output it to. So it has the whole thing you saw before. Like if you change the size of your screen, these windows would change sizes.
I saw one that you guys did recently on Instagram, and it stacked you top to bottom.
Yep.
Like, can you see the bed?
Yeah. I mean, even a little bit right now. I mean, I bet if I stretch out my screen, I can see more of your...
I can't.
I just want
it's even more vertical.
Like, I just need people to know that this room is probably the last to get renovated in this house. This is not my preferred style. I don't want people to judge me.
You need wood slats or a...
Right. This was one of my first DIY projects. I have since gotten much better. Don't judge me. I don't know where this lamp came from, and I hate this painting. So
Drew's experiencing some angst now that we're on video.
Well, you're over there with your freaking metal thing, and I have whatever the hell this is from a thrift store. So
yeah,
I don't want people to think.
The other one behind me was inspired by Drew, though.
Correct.
Yeah.
John F. Kennedy.
That's like how we first got to know each other, was the Soft American article.
Speaking of political things, do you guys want to talk about MAHA first?
Do we? So
we just want to like blow it all up, right?
I was personally going to save that for the second half.
I was going to try to do an RFK voice on.
I don't think you can. Do not debut
Don't
that
try.
right now.
I don't think I could do it. I think I could do it.
It's actually it's a disability. We should.
It is. We shouldn't make fun of that. It is a real medical condition.
Correct. Jesus. Okay.
How about we make a good faith effort to talk about like science and stuff for a minute before we get political, and then we dive in.
I mean, it's all the same, right? At this point.
It is. It's going to be politics of science. Like that's touchy.
Ooh, I like that. The politics of science.
That's what we're going to spend a lot of this episode on, guys. If you're wondering why we're like doing weird voices and talking about video recording and stuff. We will eventually talk about the politics of science. But I wanted to open, and this is specifically because people in the Discord mentioned an interest in it. So we want to be responsive to what the audience talks about. And we briefly touched on longevity related stuff last in part 2. And you mentioned in there that if you wanted to do real longevity research, you would have to do these really long duration, sweeping, well-structured, well-controlled, very expensive studies. And since those are hard to do, instead, what mostly gets done is we look at mechanisms that we assume lead to longevity. So I kind of want to start by, and I have a list of like ones I've heard a lot about, but I just kind of want to hand it off to you and talk about like which of these mechanisms seem promising and which ones maybe got a lot of attention but aren't as meaningful to real outcomes.
Yeah, it's a super exciting question to answer because I think there is a lot of really good science that are happening in this space right now. Is what does keep people alive for many years, but also critically important, what keeps people well in those years, right? So we talked about this a little bit, I think, in the first episode about this difference between longevity, which is the years in your life, and health span, which is the life in your years. And those two things are intertwined. Like, I don't want to live to 140 if I'm bedridden and, can't go to the bathroom by myself. But I'd think about it if I could be skiing and biking and hiking and doing all kinds of fun stuff. And so I think that's where the science is getting really interesting, is figuring out not only what keeps us alive, but what also keeps us healthy. They are often intertwined, but they aren't always, they can sometimes be mutually exclusive.
So which of the so I'm just going to ramble off a bunch of markers and let you talk about which ones you think deserve to be talked about.
Okay.
mTOR signaling, autophagy, mitochondrial function, ApoB, cardiorespiratory fitness, often treated synonymously as just VO2 max, but there are certainly other ways to measure cardiorespiratory fitness, C-reactive proteins, telomere lengths, and then I think we did NAD plus decent justice in part 2, but I'll put that on the list as well.
Yeah. All really fun biohacker buzzwords right now.
Exactly.
And so I think if you were to dive deep into each of those things, and I'll add a few more buzzwords for you. Epigenetics, or cell senescence, or you hit my favorite one lately, which is mitochondrial dysfunction. I love that one. Chronic inflammation, right? I think all of these things they're all important. They're all intertwined, right? So if you look at some of these mechanisms together, metabolic health, that's another really important one, right? So if you look at all these mechanisms together, you think about the way that your body is going to utilize fuel from a metabolic perspective. If it starts to not utilize that fuel appropriately, you get inflammation, you get organ dysfunction, you get organelle dysfunction, like mitochondrial dysfunction. But the problem is that people want a cure for each of these individual things. Oh, here's another one that's coming up lately that's really got me rolling my eyes. Biological clocks, right?
Oh, I have questions.
When I did a little bit of like prep before this conversation, that came up a bunch of times, and I didn't have enough time to like read what they were talking about.
Yeah.
I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, it's kind of like a mixture of a lot of these measures. So I'm actually working with a couple of these companies to figure out if they actually give us good information, actionable information. And so I think the thing is that when you look at all of the components that you're talking about, and you can actually find a couple of papers that look at the 12 hallmarks of aging, which look at all of these components in kind of a big Venn diagram. You can see at the end of the day, they're all important, but they're all going to be affected by many of the same inputs. If we go back to this idea of metabolism, of eating a healthy diet, getting your exercise in, doing your strength training, make sure that you're sleeping. And I think this is the part where people get really into the weeds, is thinking about how to attack these teeny tiny mechanisms rather than thinking about the behaviors that are going to affect all of these mechanisms at the same time. It's fun to think about. I'm a biochemist, right? I love to get down and dirty into the weeds. I'm probably one of the few people that can follow these pathways that come up: mTOR signaling, insulin resistance signaling, telomeres, epigenetic pathways. I can follow all that when I'm listening to a podcast. At the end of the day, good nutrition, exercise, sleep, social connection, those are the levers that we have to pull that are going to affect all of these other mechanisms.
So have you followed along with MOPS and MOs long enough to understand our obsession with Goodhart's law?
Yes.
Because it seems like that's what's happening here is we have this like complex system of things that interact with each other: sleep, nutrition, exercise, social connections, sense of purpose, whatever, all these things. And instead of acknowledging the complex interconnectedness of the system, we try to like dive in and like pluck one piece out of it and say that like this is the thing and we're going to manipulate this thing. And I remember, I guess it would have been like 2017 or 18, I was like just getting into the human performance world, and for like a month or two there, everybody was saying that like mTOR stuff was like the most important thing, and like which supplements were like more and less mTOR, whatever. It was like ridiculous. And then since like 2018 or 19, I don't hear anybody talk about mTOR signaling nearly as much as they did for that like brief period. Like, are we wasting our times trying to find tiny mechanisms and then like Goodhart ourselves to death by like trying to manipulate that thing that just happened to correlate, not cause the outcome, when we should just be like eating fruits and veggies and going to bed at a healthier time?
So this will be a fun exercise for people that are listening. There is a chart of metabolism that you can Google. And if you look at it from 15 feet away, it just looks like this absurd network of enzymes and metabolites and fuel systems. And they kind of break it down by organ. And when you get and zoom in, you could pick apart tens of thousands of enzymes, of cofactors, of inputs and outputs, which means that mTOR was the flavor of the week, 2 years ago. And now we could talk about NAD again, but that seems to be the really fun one that people are excited about. If you get down into the functional medicine world, they're super concerned about the MTHFR gene, right? I love that one. It's like, you look at it and you're like, is that the motherfucker gene? Yes. Science is fun. But you can pick about, there are tens of thousands of candidates. So like, this is exactly what you're saying is, I could talk to you about all of these enzymes and all of the peptides that we can use and the infusions and the supplements. And at the end of the day, it's still metabolism, and it's still going to be mainly driven by what you put in your body, what you output of your body, and how much rest and regeneration that you give it.
I don't know how to ask this. Should people even spend time digging into some of these things before they've sorted out all of the basic building blocks, like the nutrition, like the sleep, like the social connection? Is it even worth investing in different strategies to attack some of those biomarkers, or should you just wait until all of those basic building blocks are kind of, I don't want to say optimized, but at least accounted for in your sort of daily rhythm, if that makes sense?
Yeah, let me answer that in two parts. If you are super excited about this biochemistry, you should become a scientist.
It's fair.
You should go into a lab, and let me tell you what the labs are like to study this stuff. You're in a gigantic concrete building with a pipette and 50 machines around you, and you spend 8 hours a day mixing chemicals, extracting samples, freezing them, unfreezing them, doing the analysis, doing all this. That is what a scientist does. They drill in to one or two of these enzymes or genes or proteins, and they spend 40 years figuring out what they do. One gene, one enzyme, one protein, right? So if you want to get deep down into the weeds, there is a profession for you. It's not very well funded right now, but it is there for you. If you're just an average human being and you want to dabble and look at this stuff and be like, cool. Like today I'm studying about mTOR, and tomorrow I'm studying the MTHFR gene. And, next Wednesday I'm going to look at NAD because I'm just curious and I think this stuff is fun. Awesome. Just know you're looking at the tiniest speck on that gigantic pathway that actually makes your body go. It's fun. It's interesting. The levers are still going to be the same at the end of the day.
So I don't know if this is like helpful or not useful. I found it interesting. So you work in a lifestyle medicine role. I've gone through some of the lifestyle medicine content. My team at work is going through all this stuff. And you crack open the textbook and you start learning about some of their material, and they've got their pillars of lifestyle medicine: nutrition, physical activity, restorative sleep, stress management, avoidance of risky substances, social connection. And it was like a weird click for me because I'd been presented with a framework before that was a little simpler. It was Ben Bergeron's 5 Factors of Health that he uses in his gyms and stuff like that. And it's move, eat, think, recover, and connect. The pillars of lifestyle medicine are just the 5 factors of health plus don't do drugs.
Yes.
Yes, we can go real deep on this stuff, and we can look at this metabolic network diagram and all that goodness. And for those who go, I'll put the link in the show notes for the diagram she's talking about. If you go to it and you're somebody who like previously did your CSCS or something like that, you're going to get a little bit of PTSD from gluconeogenesis and beta oxidation and stuff like that. And Drew will get mad because of all the energy systems presentations he's had to sit through. But like it actually isn't complicated at all in terms of the stuff you should do to optimize it. Like we get way in the weeds on these things, and we're getting in the weeds even a little bit in this conversation. But move, eat, think, recover, connect. Like do each of those things a little bit better.
Don't do drugs.
Also, don't do drugs. Yeah.
I think this is where, an extension of the first 2 conversations that we have is scientists are really excited about looking at, you brought up the Krebs cycle, right? Or glycolysis, really excited about looking at one of those enzymes that makes that pathway go around for 40 years, right? What we all want to know is like, should I be doing cryo? Should I be taking a supplement? How do I optimize these things? And the thing that I would say is, even if those fun, complementary types of activities, which I study all day, every day, do actually have an effect on your body, it is minuscule compared to the 5 pillars or the 6 pillars. I work at Stanford. We have 7. We add gratitude to our pillars.
Nice.
What does that look like? Finish your train of thought, but then I want to hear what gratitude looks like as a pillar.
Yeah. The actual behaviors that you can engage in at the end of the day that are going to hit those 5, 6, 7 pillars are going to be exponentially more helpful for these teeny tiny enzymes and molecules than something like a cold plunge or red light therapy. Could these things, we talked about how they can actually be useful for specific needs cases in addition to wellness in the last hour. If you haven't listened to it yet, go back and listen. But, I get excited about looking at this biochemistry. But at the end of the day, we don't have too many levers to pull.
Context for the gratitude question.
Gratitude, yes.
Well, as we're talking about 5 pillars or 6 pillars or 7 pillars, I'm thinking of the military who loves pillars and loves, I don't want to like put H2F on blast, but like, you create these kind of factors of health, and they make sense on paper, but where the military tends to bastardize things and ruin it is that now all of a sudden they have to be measurable. And in order to be measurable, you have to put a lot of workload on soldiers to either log things, participate in things, download things, do things that they don't want to do. And then next thing you know, they don't give 2 shits about sleeping because they don't want to fill out your survey. So gratitude is an interesting one because that seems like a very soft, immeasurable, gray, sticky, squishy thing. And you mentioned it. I'm also thinking of conversations we've had in the past with Newton Chang at Google. They have a great health program. And when we asked him about how do you measure that? What are your ROIs? He's like, we just do it because we know it works. And so I'm trying to drill into the military's brain. Like sometimes it's okay to just do things because we know that they work. So with all that being said, talk about gratitude.
Yeah. So in our pillar at Stanford, we lump together gratitude and sense of purpose together. And as you were discussing this and thinking about, H2F, total force fitness, the what is the one that the VA uses?
Whole health.
Whole health. Yes. Thank you. Those diagrams look exactly the same as everything that we're talking about right now.
The whole health diagram actually appears in the H2F handbook. Right. Yeah.
So when we're thinking about gratitude and purpose, I could tell you as a scientist, we do actually have some validated surveys that we can measure these with, right? Like, what is your sense of gratitude? What is your sense of purpose? What's your quality of life? There are a lot of different ways that we can measure it. And we do in the science. And it happens in the real world fairly often. I mean, the military, you guys are filling out surveys all the time for these kinds of things. um, I think we probably have a quorum of data now to say it's important, just do it, right? Like, I think we're there. And if the scientists, again, want to spend 40 years drilling deep into the neurons that change when you are journaling or practicing your spirituality or expressing gratitude to a colleague or a child or whatever, super cool, right? Like, that's super fun. That's what we do as scientists. I don't think it's going to move the needle on the fact that, like, if you tell somebody thank you and your gratitude for the good things in your life, then it's, we know it's a good thing. So I would go with the Google guy and be like, just do it.
Would you say, I mean, without like diving deep into a tangential rabbit hole, could you almost make the case to lump those things together under like spirituality,
I mean, I think
gratitude, sense of purpose?
that's what when I was working on the H2F and the total force fitness stuff, that was where things were getting really sticky. Is they originally, and I don't know if this has changed or not, they originally labeled it as spirituality and everybody thought immediately that it was religion. And that is not the intention with spirituality. It lumps in this idea of gratitude, of sense of purpose, of what drives you day to day.
Meaning, purpose, and value. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And again, all measurable things. I think that I've been talking about it for like, how many hours have we been recording the past couple of weeks?
This will be our third, yeah.
Yeah. That these are things that we need to get better at communicating so that people are open and receptive to receiving them, and that it doesn't automatically like trigger red flags or past experiences in their day-to-day. And you could argue that for all of the pillars, right? Like, if I said to you, I want you to eat a good diet, like, that's going to look really different for a lot of different people. And they're going to have some real serious issues. Like, to this day, like, steamed broccoli makes me gag. Why? Because my mother was terrible at cooking broccoli and she forced me to eat it at the dinner table. And I, to this moment, can't do it. You think about exercise, like why people like to do exercise, why they don't, why they sleep, why they don't. These are all behaviors that are so hard and challenging to individualize for people. And yet we have to figure out a way to do it, because at the end of the day, we now have mentioned 8, 9 different organizations that seem to be coming to the same conclusion that these are the pillars and these are the levers that matter, regardless of whether or not they change your, HDL cholesterol or your epigenetic clock. They seem to be working.
How would you communicate those pillars, especially the softer ones?
That is an excellent question.
Thank you.
Yeah. And a really tough one. Helping people to recognize value and importance in their life is a real challenge. And that is why people are going to change their behaviors around these pillars. If they value what fruits and vegetables do to their day-to-day, if they value what strength training does to their body, if they value the way that they sleep after a good night, then they will engage in those behaviors in the future as best they can. And so I don't know if it's necessarily telling people, but maybe it's more important to show them. And this goes back, I hate to do this, but this kind of goes back to measuring and letting people kind of like figure out how these different pillars, how these different levers are affecting their body, whether it's recognizing at the end of the day when you wake up and your aura or your Whoop says you're recovered, you've gotten 9 hours of sleep, you feel amazing. Or if it's waking up the following day and writing in your gratitude journal about how good you feel after a good night's sleep, even if you didn't wear your biometric feedback, device. I think when people can recognize and value what these behaviors are doing in their day-to-day, they will engage in them, number one, which is most important, but most important is sticking to them long-term.
So at this point, we're going to slightly pivot. We're not going to hard pivot, but we're going to start leaning into like the drama a little bit. And we're going to start with science drama before we get to the politics of science. But my first one, and this could be a total miss. Are you familiar with the keto CTA trial that got published like maybe 2 months ago now? Feels like about how long it was, maybe 6 weeks. I don't know.
Yeah.
Plaque begets plaque, all that.
I followed the drama. I didn't dig deep into the science there because at this point in my career, I just roll my eyes at any of the keto stuff. But
It's fair.
People swear
I don't
by
know
it.
if you have thoughts on it. I'll lay out like a little bit of like the overarching themes of what people are saying and then let you respond. But this was, depending on who you talk to, this was either like bombshell research that completely overturned the whole story of HDL, cholesterol, whatever. Or if you ask other people, it was like pretty terrible research that failed to report on the primary registered outcome when they pre-registered it, and that didn't have an appropriate control group to even compare to. They essentially looked at people who were eating essentially keto, but they all already had like pretty out of whack cholesterol numbers. And they argue that because those cholesterol numbers did not correlate with the outcomes they expected, that then you can't assume that like the HDL LDL ratio matters that much. Like it's challenging that whole notion. What critics pointed out is that all these people had like wildly out of whack cholesterol levels, and all of them were laying down atherosclerotic plaques at an alarming rate. And so you were only looking at like the very high end of the spectrum, and you weren't comparing it to anybody in the low or moderate end of the spectrum. And it's just, I think like once again, we've gotten lost in the like weeds of the science a little bit. And also I think people should approach research with skepticism anytime somebody's saying one study seems to flip the script on something that has been shown by dozens, hundreds, thousands of studies. I don't know. It's just an interesting science drama thing that played out in some pretty nerdy circles.
Yeah, totally. And I think, without commenting on the details of the study, except to say baseline measurements really matter, right? So the population that you're looking at, if you are already looking at a group of people that have some kind of dyslipidemia, or they've got some, early stage markers for disease risk, and then you start to add increased load onto them, you're going to see a really slow rise of, HDL, LDL, fatty plaques in the vessels, as opposed to taking somebody that, I don't know, completely opposite to that. They've been a vegan the whole time, right? And they have really beautiful arteries. You're going to see a dramatic change, right? And so this is why it's so important, without getting into the weeds of that particular study, for people to understand how to read the science and how to interpret the statistics, and why I'll pivot us a little bit into the world that we are finding ourselves in right now from research funding and political standpoint. And we talked about it at length in the very first hour of us talking together. It's why it's so important that we communicate what our science actually means to the general population, because it's so easy to misinterpret a slow line up in the wrong population as compared to a rapid line up if you were to look at that graph in a different way from a very healthy population. The interpretation of the scientist is going to be, well, of course, this is a shit study. They started out with the wrong population. Of course, they didn't see much change, as opposed to somebody that is already perhaps suffering from confirmation bias, and they're just looking for any data that says, yeah, keto is good for me because it's worked for me and I like this way of eating. And so therefore the internet blows up because, oh, look, keto works for everybody, when in fact you dig into the data and that's not actually what the science showed. And again, this comes back to scientists sucking at Instagram and getting better at communicating our science.
This is okay. I have a dumb research paper question for you.
I'm ready.
Because for the most part, the structure of all of these papers is the same, sort of your abstract, discussion, methods, etc. What does it take in the research world to either change that framework and or add to that framework to maybe bring it up to speed and bring it to modernity and add a component about communicating what this all means, almost like a TLDR, here's what this actually means for you, and having that be part of a research paper so that people like me, Alex, other folks can digest it and think, here we go.
I'll butt in to add to Drew's question, because a paper that I've been waiting for multiple years now just got published. It's the ARMI study, ARMI. It looked at a bunch of predictors of injury risk among trainees. I had heard like a pre-brief of it from the Usarium researchers a couple years ago, was pretty excited about it. And like if you read the whole study, you can find some interesting stuff in it. I am still digesting it to like find the like takeaways that people need to know about. Because if you read the whole like methods, conclusion, results, whatever stuff, it kind of just says there's a bunch of things that influence injury risk. Here's a few of them. But like, duh, like I know, like which ones mattered more, like which ones were the most significant, which ones were like, which ones do we have like modifiable things we know work to change
Exactly.
that? Like there was no like, why should I care section.
Mm-hmm.
Like
why should
I know
I care?
why I care about
there
the
you
study,
go.
but
Why should I care section?
Yeah.
Can we add that to journal? Team, this episode of Mops and Mo's is brought to you by Train Heroic. Train Heroic is a reliable, well-designed platform for programming, tracking, and communicating with athletes. If you've been with us for any length of time, you will know that Train Heroic is the platform that we use to power our own training, long and strong, which you can find at our website, mopsandmos.com. If you're looking for a solid platform to support your own coaching, whether it's your full-time role or a side hustle, Train Heroic is definitely worth checking out. You can use the link in any of our show notes, you can find it in our newsletter, or you can head to our website, mopsandmos.com/training to get your first week for free. Articles?
Yeah. Okay. So there's two things here that I think are really important. Number one, my opinion, we should not, absolutely not change the way that we communicate science between scientists, right?
Really?
I will read that paper and be like, oh, look at this statistical method that they used and look at this effect size and why did they do it with this population and why did they use that dose? And for me, I'm like enraptured by, like, it is thrilling for me to read those 14 pages of lots of black words on a lot of white space, right? But I will say that there is a significant need for the communication part that is currently right now only done in most cases via a press release, right? And that press release is what gets picked up by journalists. It's what gets picked up by the newspapers and everything else. And most of the time, if I'm a scientist and I read that study and then I go to the press release, most of the time I'm like, that's not really what that science said.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we have started, this is baby steps, team, baby steps. We have started doing something called graphical abstracts in my world. Have you guys seen these?
Yeah. Does this just mean pictures?
It just means it's
infographic.
Yeah. And that's generous. It's generous.
Bless your hearts.
Yeah. Bless your hearts. Some of them are really good, right? Some of them are really good. Most of them, because we are terrible at communicating our science, are just like absolute dumpster fires. Like you look at them and you're just like, I don't even know. There's a mouse on here. It's got a needle in its head. And like the outcomes look like they made it run on a treadmill and there's a fat droplet, right? Like it doesn't actually communicate the science well. And so I think, Drew, the best place that we can start to figure this out is like, let's get some graphic designers to work with the scientists to really understand what their science says, show it to the scientist and say, is this representing what you've done appropriately so that we can send it out into the world? Because there's not that check right now. The press office gets it. They send out a bunch of words. Journalists pick it up and they spin it however the hell they want to. Whereas something like an infographic, I think is really helpful. You guys, have you guys ever seen those ones that scientists don't do this? These are like better people at communication than we are. But you know those graphs that you see, they're like really interactive and they like the bars will change over time, right? So like a really good example of this is like, what do people die of starting in like 1750 to 2025? And like you watch the bars and it was like tuberculosis and pertussis and like all the infectious diseases, getting kicked by a horse. And then now it's like, you watch it and it flips around and the number 1 and 2 are cancer and cardiovascular disease, right? And so I think if we can figure out how to do really digestible, easy pictures, things like that, that could be super helpful for people. That's just me.
Would it be silly or revolutionary for a university to hire a marketing agency specifically for their research department?
So they do have communications offices. Every single
I'm
university
talking
has
like a
communications office.
marketing
Yes,
agency.
yes, that's where I was going to go.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that would be money well spent. Because I'll tell you what, my Restore marketing team would kick the ever-living bejesus out of the communications office of most universities because they're just really good at getting the words, the pictures, the emotions just right so that people come in and do their cryotherapy and get their NAD infusions. And they think it's so important. And it is. Team Restore, love you. I'm very excited about our data. But that is the message that the human on the other side of this communication pipeline is getting is nobody knows what the physical activity guidelines are, but they can talk to you all day about high intensity interval training or zone 2 training and why one is better than the other because they've seen it, they've heard it, it's been repeated to them over and over and over on podcasts and on infographics and on Instagram and on TikTok. And we don't have a marketing agency for the stuff that actually matters.
Man, I have dabbled in infographic creation kind of stuff. You'd have to go pretty far back in Mops and Mo's to like find a few that I did. They take more work than it seems
Well,
like
you'd
they
think,
do.
you'd think AI could help with that, though. I mean, I have
Maybe. That's a good
ChatGPT
start.
turning my 4-year-old's drawings into stuffed animals. Like, you'd think that, I don't know. That's where my head went, because when I want to digest research quickly nowadays, I just upload the PDF into AI and it's like, give me the takeaways, boom. And that has
Okay,
to
wait.
be.
This is a super important point, and I'm gonna pivot us now into politics. I'm gonna drive this
Please.
bus. Are you ready?
Take us
This
there.
is
This is in my notes coming up.
Yeah, this is why this MAHA movement is so successful right now.
Dang, there we go.
And it's why when real trust in science started to get broken down during the COVID pandemic, it's why we lost as scientists, as clinicians that knew what we were talking about. It's because the microphone was given to screamers. And when you scream something that is just bite-size enough, that is just repeatable enough, it starts to become dogma and people start to really live it out, worship it, if you will. We could go down the crazy rabbit hole of red dye number 40, right? And how everybody thinks that is the thing. By taking red dye number 40 out of Skittles and replacing it with beet juice, that is going to be the way that we are moving the needle on health in our population. No, but they heard it so often in podcasts, in, social media, on TikTok. And once somebody picks up something so simple as red dye is bad, and it gets repeated enough, everybody thinks that that's the lever that we need to pull, when in the reality, it is not going to do anything to the health of our society. Nothing.
So I think, like, at this point, she did the pivot for us. We're going to talk
You're
about
welcome.
Make America Healthy Again.
It is her third time on, so she knows how this works.
She's got the feel for the pod now.
Do you see how I plugged hour number 2 and hour number 1 a couple of times?
It was good.
Too?
That was good.
But I will say, before we dive into it, I think there's some like things people would expect us to talk about. And first of all, for all those things, go back to when we did a 2-part MAHA thing a while back, because I think we addressed the like hot topic parts of it. And what I mean is like food dyes, raw milk, seed oils.
Love raw milk.
Whatever. We'll take all those and we'll acknowledge that they're like mildly interesting conversations to have about all those things. But I think here we can probably agree, I hope, we'll see among the three of us, that those are all really distractions. Like, even if like everybody who's currently drinking pasteurized milk switch to raw milk, or vice versa, everybody's drinking raw milk switch to pasteurized milk, I don't think it would make that much of a difference. Like
your
lattes,
your lattes would be better. I will tell you that.
I just don't think it matters that much. I think if we eliminated all the food dyes, again, I don't think it matters that much. If they kept eating the things that the food dyes were in, not a significant change. If we we get everybody who's currently doing beef tallow to switch to seed oils, or everybody who's currently doing seed oils to switch to beef tallow, yeah, like there's some things that would probably change, but those aren't, again, if we are triaging the levers that pulling them would make the biggest difference, none of those would rise to the top. They're just things that get people worked up on the internet right now.
Indeed.
So I want to bring it back to kind of where Drew and I started our first MAHA conversation 6 months ago. And the case I tried to make to defend it was, I hope that it creates the potential for either bipartisan or nonpartisan action on some of the obvious issues that we all agree are problems. Increasing access to whole food options, whether it's for school-aged kids or everybody. Increasing childhood physical activity. Bringing down the cost of healthcare, improving health outcomes. Maternal mortality stuff. Like all like the things that like do have a pretty meaningful impact on like the health of America. Are we still in a place where MAHA could produce that kind of action, or are we just stuck in culture war stuff again and nothing really changed?
Well, I can tell you a little bit from what I'm hearing from scientists and policy friends of mine. I think overall, they have decided that this is going to be a pretty aggressive disaster for public health. However, they all see interesting opportunities to move the needle on their individual pillar, lever, whatever we want to call it, right? Because there is reception to, for the very first time, be talking about the power of these behaviors that we're talking about, right? And I think that people, the real person, the lay person, is kind of sick of talking about statins and metformin, not in the longevity sense of metformin, but using it for type 2 diabetes. Like there is
That was a Peter Attia reference for people listening.
Well done.
No. There is a real desire for people to understand, like, what can I do to get agency over my body and my health before I get to a point where I need to go see a doctor because I'm sick, right? And we have absolutely abdicated that conversation in the public health discourse that we've been having. And it's something that I've been working on and sort of screaming about for my little tiny corner for 15 years now. And a really funny one that has come up recently in this whole conversation is that there's this big conversation about how medical schools are going to lose their accreditation or their funding or something if they don't start teaching nutrition to doctors, right? I'm like, some of my first and earliest papers that I ever wrote as
that was
a
her whole
scientist,
focus for a while.
My whole focus was, can we please teach nutrition and other lifestyle behaviors to medical students? And I was thinking at the time, I was like, they just need one course, right? Like they just need one course to recognize where the connections are, how insulin is, mediated by physical activity and exercise and whatever. I have a great doctor friend. So this is a guy that they work in physical medicine and rehab, right? So that's kind of a lot of physical stuff. And he's like, look, I'm a physiatrist. I work in helping people get healthier, recover from injury, all these things. He's like, I know just enough about the eyeball to know that if my patient comes in and they're falling over sideways because they can't see straight, I need to refer them out to an ophthalmologist who actually knows about the eyeball and can do something about it, right? And that was the whole premise in my, the first 10 years of my work is let's teach the doctors enough so they can say, let's refer to a dietitian, let's refer to a physical therapist, let's refer to an athletic trainer, right? Like it's all circular, coming back to our first conversation. And what I think the problem is coming up now is we are recognizing all of these holes, whether it's education for physicians, whether it's education for the general patient. And rather than saying, yes, we need to have this conversation and continue down the path that we have been on for chronic disease prevention, treatment, etc., we're saying, let's throw everything that we've done out for the last 50 years and pivot to these things that we haven't been paying attention enough to. And that's where we're seeing this political sort of agenda start to unfold and where we're seeing some real problems with the allocation of grants and grant funding away from things that we know are critically important. And this is the part that kind of is crazy to me. I don't see it pivoting to the stuff that we're talking about. I just see it going away. Mm-hmm. And so we're talking a good talk, and my policy people and my scientist people are saying there might be an opportunity here to like get in and have this conversation that we've been trying to for so long. And yet it seems like those doors aren't really even opening either.
So I want to flesh out something you kind of skipped over a little bit there. And you mentioned that we've abdicated the conversation about prevention and lifestyle and things like that. And I think layered into the whole MAHA discourse has been this idea that like doctors just don't care about lifestyle stuff. doctors don't care about nutrition, doctors don't care about exercise, doctors don't care about sleep, like all these things that like you have to go to alternative medicine type of routes to get better answers on. And my perception has been, and this is from talking to a few doctors, reading some of the research, I think doctors do care about those things. I think the system the doctors are in doesn't give them the time or the tools to move the needle on those things. Like they care about you eating healthier and they care about you exercising and they know those things would help. And many of them even say to do those things during their consults, but patients don't change because of doing that. It has to, I mean, it comes back to like the meaning, purpose, and values thing we talked about earlier. Moving the needle on a person's why is really hard. And so I don't think it's that doctors don't care about these things. It's just that doctors know how hard it is to change patient behavior on those things. And it's like you said, we don't need to, like we're cutting research from other things, but I haven't seen any initiatives yet to lean into what actually gets those changes to happen or which policies would be conducive to those things. Like we're just not, I don't know. Nobody's actually explained how the steps that have been taken so far contribute to the outcomes that they say they want.
Yeah, I think that is a really important observation here. And I would be thrilled to hear if that became a part of the initiative. Is yes, we recognize that these are behaviors that we haven't really talked much about. Although I will also push back a little bit on that as well. And without like picking sides here, Michelle Obama spent 8 years advocating for healthy, nutritious food in schools. She had a whole campaign. It was called Let's Move. And she got so much pushback.
Yes, blasted.
I do believe there was a line by a senator that I will not name that was something to the effect of, you can pry the French fries out of my cold, dead hands, right? Like it was, so like, I would like to say we have abdicated the conversation in the sense that the general population hasn't really heard it. I will say there's been a significant amount of effort behind the scenes to try to move these initiatives forward. And I will tap on this. We have never funded nutrition, physical activity, the other pillars that we're talking about in the ways that we fund, chronic disease or biomedical research. It's just never been the will of the NIH, the will of foundations. And in fact, we had an amazing grant that was given to, I believe it was the University of Colorado. It was like $10 million or something by Coca-Cola to build a physical activity center. And they ended up having to give it back because there was such an uproar over the money was coming from Coca-Cola. Therefore, it had to be like completely biased. And the university was like, hey, I can't get this money anywhere else, literally. And what happened at the end of the day is they had to give the money back because they had such a huge pressure campaign. And the foundation, the facility never got built. It just went away. So there is, I think, an important moment in time here to say these levers, these pillars are critically important. We have chronically underfunded them. And we should keep talking about AIDS research and cancer research and all of these other things. Can we figure out a way to coexist here? Because we can't have a one versus the other funding mechanism or political conversation.
Why?
Go ahead.
Why? Like, we've known that those basic pillars are foundational forever. Why don't they get funding? Is it not sexy? Does it not generate enough revenue for a company? Like, why don't they get funded?
I think there are a lot of different reasons. The first is there's only behavior at the end of that pipeline, right? So I think that is.
Are we avoiding that because it's complicated? Or?
We're avoiding it because it's complicated and there's also no market share.
Not profitable.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's kind of what I was getting at. Like, it's just, I don't know. You end up in this circuitous argument of like, we know what we need to do, but we're not doing it because there's no money in it.
Yeah.
So are we like self-perpetuating this issue that we're also like blaring to try to fix?
This goes back to the conversation of in the very beginning of how do we get people to actually do this, right? Like I would argue that nutrition, which is my world, physical activity, which is my world, probably sleep, stress, gratitude, all these other things have been underfunded sort of chronically. We can do the studies. I can do the studies. I can put a mouse on a wheel and I can tell you exactly what's going on with lipid metabolism, or I could feed a diet of keto to a mouse, or I could feed it to a human. And at the end of the day, the answer stays the same, right? And I think that's potentially why people are like, do we really need to fund 1 million studies to come up with the same answer that doesn't have any market value, right? So if we can come up with a way potentially to give some market share to these outcomes, and people have tried, right? Like, and they get a lot of shit for it. Like companies like Noom and Weight Watchers and all these places that have gyms, you could lump gyms into this space, right? They're trying to make money to help people do the things that we know matter. And it just doesn't seem to move the needle. Flip that. And if we're talking about developing a pharmaceutical product, or we're trying to develop an intervention that has some kind of value, financial, monetary value to it, we will drive that hard down the pipeline in order to see the return on investment. And this is actually a really important and like a non-cynical viewpoint of how we fund science. The majority of companies that are developing these market-ready gadgets, pharmaceuticals, whatever, are relying on taxpayer-funded science to build the foundation to understand the mechanisms that are actually going to create a product at the end of the day, right? So we give as taxpayers, I think it's something like and you can correct me in the show notes or Google it right now. It's like for every dollar we put into basic research, you get something like $2.61 or somewhere upwards close to $3 of return on investment through, market value, through changes in health outcomes, utilization of healthcare, whatever. This is crazy. We don't have that research for nutrition and exercise. Just a study was just published literally 2-3 weeks ago that only really started looking at how much money are we saving if people start exercising more at the population level in the United States? How much money are we saving if people are eating apples instead of beef tallow French fries, right? We don't have that data. And I think that's part of the problem here is we don't have a product when we talk about nutrition and exercise. So we've got this vacuum of like people filling it in and saying, yeah, beef tallow is better than an apple, like head exploding emoji. And we also don't have data to really drill home to people why it's so important to fund this research and then figure out a way to get it out into the world. And until we do that, we can't compete with biomedical and we can't compete with pharma.
So does that in part explain this like incessant focus on the mechanisms we talked about at the start, the mTOR, the ApoB, because even if we can't change the behaviors, or if it's not profitable to change the behaviors that adjust the whole system, maybe we can come up with like a pharmaceutical or a supplement that messes with the mechanism and like act like we hacked it in a good way, when in fact we just turned to profit rather than health as the solution.
Yeah. I'm trying to answer this question without being cynical, because I truly believe...
Pretty cynical, sorry.
Be cynical.
Truly believe, I mean this from the bottom of my little scientist heart, my health-related scientist heart.
Very healthy heart.
I believe, my very healthy heart. I believe that both of these areas are critically important, and I worry about pitting them against each other.
Okay.
Because I think that's what MAHA is doing. I think we are pitting one column against another column and not recognizing how critical they both are. I wrote a blog post about this. I think I mentioned it in episode 1 about how we need to be thinking about prevention and treatment, right? Like people are going to get cancer. It's an unfortunate reality of life. It's an unfortunate reality of an aging population. You can exercise your little heart out forever, starting at age 7 and up until age 77. You can eat a perfect diet and you can just get a really, really shitty hand dealt to you. And if those mechanisms aren't in place to help you and we aren't advancing that science, then what are we doing, right? Because you know what's not going to save you when you get cancer? Going for a run. It might help you feel better. It might help your treatment work better, but it is not going to save you. And that's the positioning of MAHA right now that's driving me crazy, is that it has to be one versus the other.
Well, I think that's, as if I've learned anything in the social media space, it's that nuance doesn't get you anywhere. Nobody wants to have like a conversation about complexities and how two things matter at the same time, yada, yada. So yeah, that's exactly what it is. And they know how to play that game. You're trying really hard not to be cynical. I don't even know if this is really a question. I'm going to like make a statement and then let you riff, and it might draw out some cynicism. We'll see. Gold standard science. What does that phrase mean?
It's the best.
Well, it's not what's being encouraged in the current administration. So gold standard science is what scientists are doing. Like we have the best scientists in the world doing the most well-funded randomized control trials from yeast, C. elegans, all the way up to human beings, right? Looking at all of these mechanisms. By the way, that's often how you study these little enzymes, is you look at these teeny weeny little organisms, you let them live for 30 days or however long their lifespan is, and then you call it a longevity study, right? But not to call out any of my friends over at Harvard, but there is a lot of this NAD stuff is like, it's in
Yeast?
cells and yeast and mice. It's not in humans yet. Although we have a paper in review, so hopefully we could talk about that in the future.
Whenever anybody like reports on studies done not in humans, you should have to put in all caps what the study was done in the title.
I totally agree.
Or in your picture. Your picture has a mouth.
Yeah, in my infographic. I'm trying to like move myself. The sun is like coming through the...
Yeah, sorry. If you listen to this only on audio, you can't see it, but she's getting like magnifying glass
sweating.
style. Like,
so I think this is where we need to be super thoughtful about gold level science, gold
standard
science.
I like gold.
We're doing it. We're doing it. What we're not doing is gold standard communication, right? And I think that's where we need to get better. The science is there. We do exceptional science. This is interesting. I rarely do this. But I was super fired up the other day. I posted a comment on Instagram, which opened up a bag of worms. And it happened to be on, and I will admit my bias here, I'm Harvard trained. I am very frustrated with what is going on at the defunding of scientists at Harvard. It literally, like, it frustrates me to no end. And I have many colleagues right now that are losing their labs. I have many students that are losing their postdocs. We are losing the future of the best scientists on the planet in this moment. We are watching it in real time. And I made a comment on when it was first announced that they were canceling something like $3 billion of research to the Harvard School of Public Health. I made a comment on the Harvard School of Public Health. Basically, it was like an announcement saying what was going on, and this is what you can do about it if you're an alum or you know, a person that cares. And I made a comment that was pretty simple, and I said that this is devastating. It is going to hurt every single American, as well as the careers of all of these future scientists. And somebody who, it turns out, was not a bot, responded to me and said, there is nothing that the Harvard School of Public Health has done from a scientific perspective that has ever affected my life. And so here's where my empathy, I put my professor hat on for a second and I say, okay, how can I change this person's mind without using the I word? And I said, I said, hey, and I can't remember what this person's name was. I used their name, like humanizing somebody. Hey, like I totally appreciate that you don't see this in your day-to-day, but let me give you 5 examples of how Harvard School of Public Health data has changed your life. They're in Salt Lake City, according to their profile, your life in Salt Lake City, right? And I rattled off, nobody in your community has polio anymore. The water that you drink is free from contaminants. Your firefighters are protected. They live in a fire zone. Your firefighters are protected because we understand how to help mitigate the exposure to fire. Fluoride in your water, make sure that your kids don't have cavities, whatever. And the response was something really pithy that was like, the data that's coming out of the School of Public Health is just woke BS or something like that. But this is a really important like social observation, right? This person, despite the fact that I just gave them 5 things that truly did change their community, right? Truly did affect their life. A, still didn't see it, which means my communication was not effective. But B, parroted back to me a talking point that is being used to help turn people against this, against science, against this movement. And I think this is actually a really important learning opportunity, is like the specific word of using the word woke. We're not going to go down that pathway, but like just this idea that is being like a weaponized word right now, and that it's being parroted back in a situation where they are like, let's take the funding away from the scientists. They don't do anything anyways, is really important moment for us to say, we've lost. We've actually lost the conversation right now. And we got to do a lot of really good work to get control of this narrative again, or else we are not going to see innovations like fixing polio, insert cancer, insert HIV, insert Alzheimer's, right? We are not going to see improvements in environmental toxicants. How many of them are talking about plastics in the water, and how many credit cards worth of plastic we have in our brains, right? And at the same time, we are taking money away from, creating environmental restrictions and governance. And so again, I've been harping on this for now like 3 hours with you guys. Like, we have lost the conversation. And it is so critically important, if we want this innovation, if we want scientific funding to be going to these areas that we think are so important, to get better at creating tiny sound bites, infographics, if you will, so that people know what the evidence-based talk track is, rather than simply the politically motivated one. I'm going to give you an awesome quote, and then I'll turn it back over. I know I've been talking for a while, but I love this. I love this quote. Is by Francis Collins. He was the prior director of the NIH. And he said in an interview probably like 6 or 7 weeks ago, he said, when you mix science and politics, all you get is politics. And that's where we're at right now. The scientists are getting completely sidelined. They are getting their jobs taken away, their livelihood taken away, their voices stripped. They're leaving the NIH because they are being censored in the way that they can or cannot publish their data. And what we're left with right now is politics. And that's not helpful to advancing the health of our population.
As you were talking, I was thinking about it, because you talked about like whether something actually changes somebody's opinion. And I've backed off a lot from the comment section of my own content, to be honest. And I was thinking about it, I'm at roughly 4.5 years of running the platform of some kind. Originally, it was just social media. It expanded to the podcast, things like that. But like 4.5 years of experience in the communication side of this whole thing, right? And sometimes that meant videos of exercises people should try. And sometimes that meant memes. And sometimes that meant summaries of articles. And whatever it means a lot of different things. But across 4.5 years, I think I can probably count the number of times I've like really very directly changed a single individual person's mind on an issue on one hand. And like, I hope that there are people who like aren't having long DM conversations with me or going back and forth with me in the comments whose opinions have been like maybe influenced a little bit, or they've discovered something new or something of value. But actual interactions, like me and another person, where we start off disagreeing and like somebody's mind gets changed. Like I've had my mind changed plenty of times because I try to be like, honestly, like one of the most valuable things that happens on the platform is that I find out that I'm dumb and I learn something new, and that's fantastic. But the number of times I've changed another person's mind, like 3 or 4.
So I think you're bringing up actually a really important point about science as well, is for the most part, on the whole, that's the way that scientists also approach their work, right? Like, I am willing to be proven wrong. I am willing to do this work and to set up my study to be proven wrong. And that is how we make progress in the scientific space, right? We do not go in with a preconceived notion. On the whole, there are some scientists that I think you could probably say have tried this. It always gets found out in the end, though, because the data doesn't lie, right? But I think that this is a really important component of trying to understand what science is. And it was like a knife to my heart when the person was like, it's just woke BS, right? Because they don't understand what science is and what the process is. And my mind has been changed a million times as the data starts to come out and emerge. And this is the part that I think we are missing. We are missing this nuance and this opportunity to change, because the change is coming in all of the distractions that you talked about, Alex, right? Which is like, should we be drinking raw milk? Should we be having red dye? Should we be eating seed oils? Like, are we seriously having this conversation? Like, are we seriously? And they're serious. They're serious. And those of us that like know the data are like, first of all, you're wrong. Seed oil is actually pretty good for you.
Mm-hmm.
And second of all, like, this is not the lever. This is not the lever to be pulled. We should not be setting up an autism consortium that's going to figure out what causes autism by September. That's not how this works, right? We shouldn't be firing all the vaccine scientists and backfilling with people that agree with us. That's not how science works. It's really interesting. When MAHA first came on the scene, I made a comment, and I can't remember if I actually put it out on social media or if I was just saying it in conversation. I was like, when Robert F. Kennedy gets in a room of PIs, they are going to take him to task because he has no idea what he's talking about, and they are just going to rip him to shreds. And rather than that happening, which is what should have happened, as somebody that is taking over an organization filled with scientists that are working really hard to figure out what's going on day to day, he basically said, I already disagree with you. You're fired.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the part that makes me so nervous, is if we do not continue down this path of curiosity, of openness, of being willing to have our minds changed, which is what science is. I don't know where this goes. I don't have a crystal ball, but I am not enthusiastic about it, even if there is opportunities to show how powerful nutrition and exercise can be.
I guess without risking getting too political and or cynical, now that the toothpaste is sort of out of the tube, so to speak.
I love that metaphor, by the way.
I stole it from Breaking Points earlier today. Since you're a woke scientist, I'm curious about your opinion on this. Can we fix, is the pendulum going to swing back, do you think? I mean, is this one of those things where one administration goes so extreme in one direction that inevitably the other one comes back into the other direction? I mean, or does this fundamentally change what we think about the paradigm of capital S science?
My cynical opinion on this is we have bent this curve so hard at this point that there is no coming back. I don't think there is. I think there might be a course correction. I think there's potential for opportunity on the other side of this, but I don't see science coming back in the way that it has been done in the past. I think we talked about this. I was recently at the American College of Sports Medicine conference, and all the older scientists, right? These are the people that are, 50, 60, 70. They're kind of rounding out the end of their career. Like, it'll be fine. You kids will be okay. Don't worry. And all of us are like, nope. Like when our labs are going under, when we do not have an opportunity to apply for, the NIH funding, this new funding is something like down 40% grant money. Like, that's not waste, fraud, and abuse. That's actual money going to scientists to do the work. And so I don't see how we come back from this. I am, this is funny, actually, speaking of rotten scientists, I've called myself over the past couple of years. I don't know where I heard it from, but I was like, that's me. I called myself a pathological optimist. That is something that I have often, like, I am a glass half full kind of girl. And somebody was like, do you know where that comes from? And I was like, yeah, it's just like somebody that's like constantly like thinking, you know, like not Pollyanna, but like, hey, we can get through this, right? And they're like, no, that's the book about Andrew Wakefield. And I was like, oh, interesting. So Andrew Wakefield, if you don't know who he is, he was a scientist that basically started the whole myth that vaccines cause autism. And somebody wrote a book about him, and it's called Pathological Optimist. And I was like, I should probably stop using that. But
Whoops.
as a true pathological optimist, I still don't see how this, I don't see it. I just don't see it. Which is why it's so important that we have, again, circle back to what I'm doing. It's why it's so important that we have these other avenues for scientists to start to do their good work, right? Like, we have to create communication between industry and the scientists. We have to create other pathways for them to be able to get this work done. We have to create marketing teams to help them emerge as the experts that they are, because otherwise they're going to be left behind in a trail of red dye number 40.
Should we start a scientific marketing company, the three of us?
Get some really good graphic designers
totally
and some really good like
I'm not
behavioral psychs and stuff.
I think it would be amazing. I mean, truly.
Okay, we'll take this.
Let's think about like all the amazing podcasts of the world, right? The health-based, science-based podcast. Mops and Mo's right up at the top. How many incredible scientists are truly out there trying to communicate their science? In most cases, you know, we were talking about one of your other series.
Would you include Huberman in that?
I think his guests are amazing.
Wow. Well done.
Uh-huh.
Would you include Peter Attia in that?
Actually, I think Peter's really smart. I think he communicates science very well. And I'm not saying Huberman's not smart. Huberman talks a lot.
He's a really good guest.
Yeah, he has great guests.
Great guests.
He also, here's something that drives me crazy about podcasters that you guys don't do that I love, is project your protocols and your stacks and your stuff on other people. You're just really good about being curious.
That is one thing that stuff. We're just making it up.
I don't know. You're talking about measuring your peanut butter there with some oil on the spoon for a while. So
we've all lived through some dark times. But no, okay, here's the deal. You, in your third season with us, you've transitioned perfectly to your own closer. So I'm going to throw this one at you. You ready? How would you make America healthy again?
I should have seen that one coming.
It's a softball. I'm gonna let you out with a softball.
I definitely should have seen that one coming. I think I'm going to stick to my guns on this one. I would say like all hands
guns,
on deck.
You would just do guns is what you're saying. Cool. Sorry. I won't interrupt again.
Hey man, I'm in California. That's like a touchy subject right now. Not to get political.
Well played.
What I would do is I would get everybody into a room and like really figure out how to share best practices and get people really open to having a conversation around, this is what industry does. This is what industry does well. This is what biopharma, biomedical does. This is what biomedical does well. Biopharma, biomedical does well. This is what the government does. This is what the government does well. And really figure out how to connect all of these dots so that we're moving the science forward until we open those channels of communication and get really good at telling people what we do. Heyo, athletic trainers. Then we are not going to be able to move our professions forward. It's going to be filled by a vacuum of people that don't know what they're talking about.
Do we have any stones left unturned, guys? I mean, this is our third inning.
I had one. It has to do with what I would bring to a desert island.
Ooh. Didn't we ask you that one?
You did. And the answer was kettlebell. And we decided that kettlebell was the right answer.
Sure.
But I was also thinking jump rope could be a good one.
I wouldn't. Can you make a jump rope on a desert island?
You could make it. Could you?
Like a vine.
So I was thinking about this actually a couple of days ago as we opened up a bunch of jump ropes and hung them up in our little facility.
Think about
Couldn't
islands?
you do basically everything that a jump rope offers? Isn't the jump rope just like a way of entertaining yourself while you do plyos?
Yes.
I guess it's possible.
The jump rope is
like the jump rope doesn't really make the exercise. It's just a way to like
makes it more
has that study been done? We should do that study.
Like have somebody do like low amplitude plyometrics at the same cadence and then like with
does jumping up and down 100 times burn more calories than doing it with
Yeah,
a
I'm thinking
company.
like heart rate,
Well, you have the added
changing
movement
of
the
aerobic activity. Well, that's what I'm thinking. Like, there's got to be like some
See,
added.
this is the hard-hitting question. These
Yeah.
people.
I also had a
Maybe.
runner-up to this one. It was based on a conversation. And I'm just going to open this can of worms for a tiny second here. I was also
Please.
thinking, if you're on a desert island, I think about these things. People ask me questions, and I like think about them.
Is the point that exercise would actually be a mistake if you're stranded on a desert
This is
island?
probably true.
You're wasting calories
Whoa.
and you can't find food.
Disagree.
Also true. Actually, also true. But this could help with my runner-up. So my runner-up, and this is based on a conversation and a study that I'm hopefully gonna start soon, is blood flow restriction cuffs could be really interesting, so that you could keep your skeletal muscle and not have that major output. And it kind of goes exactly to your point, Alex.
They are, in fact, popular in portions of the special operations world because of the ability to like pack a tiny box with you and take it into really remote areas and maintain muscle mass and strength and stuff. Despite
that
not
was
having
the nerdiest
equipment.
answer I think we've ever got. Well, I'm stuck here with coconuts, but I'm glad I got my BFR cuffs.
I mean, you're talking to an exercise scientist over here. I think about these things. Like, what would I need if I was surrounded by coconuts on a desert island? It could
Assuming we ignore the question of like what the power source is for the BFR cuffs, it would open the door to like the widest range of different movement patterns. Yeah, it's not a bad idea.
Skeletal muscle
I
preservation
remember
while you're there.
hearing that like beer is actually the best nutrient, so to speak, that you could have.
There was a study. This is an actual study that was done where they looked at the hydration effect after one light beer compared to one glass of water, and it was exactly the same.
Is that where people get, beer's better for me than water?
Yeah. I used to have a friend that said that Coors Light was more hydrating or had more potassium than a banana, so you should have that because it's also super hydrating. That's not true. But
not to get us back into the distractions of earlier, but doesn't milk hydrate you better than water?
Yeah, there is a study.
So really a jug of raw milk might be.
I mean, listen, as a raw
that
milker,
is a study too. You know what does that? Just while we're down this rabbit hole, is osmosis, right? So there's protein and sugar in milk, and so what it does is it draws water into your cells a little bit better because osmosis does this thing. But yeah.
I think we just missed our timing's a little bad. It might have been like a week ago. St. Arnold, specifically, there's like 4 or 5 St. Arnolds, but St. Arnold of Soissons is the patron saint of beer. And I think he's the guy who like lived off of beer for a while.
You probably could.
I think at the time it was really important because like fermented stuff was safer than just drinking contaminated water, yada, yada, yada.
Well, that's the whole thing.
Thank God for Harvard's research lab.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the early data we had to look at. Fermentation and...
Drew, it's a good idea for the same reasons as pasteurizing milk.
I just like the thick creaminess of raw milk.
Do you actually drink raw milk?
Yeah, it's really good. Tastes good. I might die young. I don't know, but
so you keep some antibiotics on hand.
It makes for phenomenal lattes. It's so creamy, and it's. Local.
I grew up in farm country, and you know what? In farm country, the farmers drink raw milk. But they literally will only drink it from like one very specific cow that is like milked by them in like a very
I know the lady that I get the milk. Like I don't.
Well, but you got to make sure she's also drinking out of the same cup because you know what's fair. All over those others is there's shit all over the others.
Shit.
So shit.
Yeah, my immune system is through the roof.
You gotta like progressively overload all your systems. You gotta like eat some stuff that progressively overloads your digestive system.
I'm just training. See? For the apocalypse.
Hormesis. Didn't we talk about hormesis in hour 1? Yeah.
I don't know if it came up in the podcast, but hormesis is like arguably my favorite, like
just enough stress, not too much. Your favorite ESIS.
That's your favorite ESIS?
Yeah.
Of all the ESI, that's your favorite one? Okay.
All right. Sorry, I took us back off track.
No, you're fine. This has been a pleasure. Part 3. Who knows? You'll probably be back at some point.
Hopefully people like this series better than the last one.
Thanks for hanging out.
Did you get the link for Discord? Are you going to be able to hang out with us over there?
Yeah, I am. I got the link.
Come communicate science with us.
Yeah, come talk to me if you've got more questions about all the things.
Awesome. All right, guys. Bye.
Thanks, team. Good night.
Team, welcome to the tail end of the 3-part series with Rachel. Takeaways for tonight. I will tell you that I think where my brain still is going is that question I asked towards the end about like the landscape of science, at least in America, is changing so dramatically. What is it? Will it go back to what it has been in the past? Will it need to change itself to survive in the future, for better or for worse? I suppose one side of that could be terrifying, but then at the same time, and Rachel's mentioned this, I think, across a couple of the conversations, the modern science world does need to do a better job communicating itself to people. So maybe this is kind of the fuel that drives that change. So maybe that could be a good thing. But regardless of how you slice it, it is a little bit terrifying to hear from the front lines, so to speak, about funding cuts, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, that was a lot.
I think I saw a lot of the like later stuff coming about the state of the research world right now. I've tried to stay a little bit plugged into that, and I already kind of know Rachel's thoughts on it. The thought that stuck with me, and I'm guessing, considering this will come out about 2.5 weeks from the day we're actually having this conversation, there's a good chance I'll already have turned this into an Instagram post because I think it might resonate with some of the right people. But the thought she said that's resonating with me is we're already doing gold standard science. What we need is gold standard communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is at the root of a lot of this. A piece of it is just like the typical science communication, like look at this study, here's what it found, here's why it matters, here's how it fits into the broader literature. But I think the other piece is the whole why you should care. And that's something that I spend a lot of time thinking about because I think it's kind of the whole thing. Like in this weird social media, health, fitness, wellness, communication space, what determines success is, can you get people to care about things? Like, can you make a relatively boring, health-oriented message into something engaging that gets people talking, that gets people sharing, that people come back for? And so I think that's something we will continue to come back to in the future, is like the science is not where the problem is, most likely. Sometimes there's issues with the funding of it and missing something and finding it out later, but that's like the whole scientific method. Like it exists to figure that out. Where we struggle is how do we make the findings of that science relevant to the people who need to know it?
MC, make science exciting again. Was it exciting?
I don't know if it was.
Make science exciting. Yeah, and I will shamelessly plug the Discord again. I know we seem to do this a lot, but we've now hung out with Rachel for over 3 hours, and hopefully somewhere in all of these conversations, some questions have been inspired, and she has made it clear to us off recording that she does want to hang out in there. She does want to answer some of those questions. So if people do have things they want to ask her about or pick her brain on, you know where to find her. But yeah, this is our first 3-part series, right? Second.
I mean, NASA was 4 parts.
NASA was 4, true. But with like one person.
Yeah, with one person.
Just riffing for 3.
Correct.
Yeah. So
I think Newton's been back a total of 3 times, but we never did a 3-part series.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true. So yeah, you're just breaking new ground over here on Mops and Mo's, this woke ass podcast. But no, yeah. Got anything else?
I mean, I think you're about to not be very woke. You're about to be literally asleep.
I'm about to be asleep. It is true. Team, thanks for stopping by. We will see you next week. Hey, Alex, let's cover our ass real quick.
Oh, great idea, Drew. All right, guys. The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode. Before you go, please rate and review the pod on the listening platform of your choice. You can also visit us on our website at www.mopsinmos.com. That's mops, the letter N, mos.com. You can check out the library of podcast episodes, our latest blog entries, any helpful resources, and also sign up for our newsletter.
Drew nailed it. Just to underline a couple of things, the podcast entries have in-depth show notes on the website. So if you missed anything or you want to read any of the research we talk about, it is all there. You can, at the bottom of the website, sign up with your email and receive future updates from us. The blog posts go a little bit more in depth in kind of written form on a couple of topics we get questions about all the time. But most importantly, I just want to ask all you guys, Our best way the word gets out is absolutely word of mouth. So tell your friends, tell the people you work with, anybody you think would find it useful. Thanks for spreading the word.
If you have any questions or comments, feel free to shoot us an email at either Drew or Alex at mopsandmos.com.
Or there's a contact form on the website.
Thank you.